Good afternoon, everyone. This is Antoine with the Coalition for Justice. Appreciate you taking this time out of your day to be here with us. We have a nice discussion and a nice bill that I think everyone should enjoy. We're actually speaking today with Elliot Major, who is the Executive Vice President of the Dorcas Home. For you all that may not be familiar with the Dorcas Home, I think this gives you an opportunity and a chance to become acquainted with the services they provide, how long they've been in the region, what kind of criteria do they look for when someone's coming into the Dorcas home. I think it'll give you a good opportunity to ask some questions. We should have a live chat that's available at this present point in time. You'll have to work with me because there's some bells and whistles and technology things that I will have to become accustomed with. But I think during this discussion, you will have a great opportunity to kind of be filled in on the background information as far as the Dorcas home, the services they provide, and moving forward. Before we start there, I do want to take a moment and just share a little bit of information. Now, the Coalition for Justice, of course, we've been providing services in Virginia for since the 1980s. And for you all that are not familiar with the Coalition for Justice, what I would recommend you do is you take a moment and possibly go to our website. If you look down below, you'll see on a banner that is where our website is located. And it can tell you a little bit more information about who we are, what we've done, and the services that have been provided as far as addressing human rights and oppression throughout Virginia as well as throughout other countries. So you get a chance to check that out. But for right now, what I want to do is begin the framework of the conversation that we're having. This is, if you're looking at the screen, you'll see a Virginia Department of Corrections monthly population summary. That monthly population summary was taken January 2020 of this year. And it shows that there are 29,180 individuals that are currently locked up in the Virginia State Penitentiary. At below, you will see in a highlighted number that there are 69,308 people that are on some kind of supervision. So when we're talking about supervision, we're talking about court community corrections, probation, parole, and even some individuals that may be on drug court. So we're looking at 69,000 individuals roughly on some kind of community supervision. This is important because everyone that goes to the institution, sooner or later they come home. Now, the question that I have is, what is it like when someone comes home and they have no home plan? Or what is it like when someone comes home after doing 30 years in a penitentiary and they have no relatives, they have nowhere to stay, they have no resources? So what happens to that individual? Now, I remember in my younger day, I remember that they said that individuals used to be given a $25 check, their clothes and whatever canteen items that they may have had, and they're dropped off in their district, and then they have to kind of find their way through the system. Now, throughout the years, some of those things have changed, and I think having this discussion today with Elliot Major should kind of shed a little bit of light of what the process is like, what home plans are like, and various things like that. And, without further ado, let me just bring Elliot Majors in with us. So give me one moment while I bring him in.
Hey, good afternoon, Brother Antoine.
Good afternoon, Elliot. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Okay, great. Glad you could take an opportunity and be with us today so we can have this discussion. I think it's important that people really truly get a clearer understanding of what the Dorcas home is and the services that are provided. Let me start by asking, you are the executive vice president and director of the Dorcas home, correct?
Yeah, and that's just my title. I'm actually the owner as well, but I take a very hands-on approach to the business. So it's not something that I own and then just delegate it down, So both my wife and my family owns the business as well. So we play an integral part in the day-to-day operations as well as the strategic planning for the business.
So basically, this is a family-owned business.
What we like to say is this is a business that just happens to be run by people who are related. You know, because a lot of times people, sometimes we say family owned, it has different connotations to it. But we like to let everybody know that we are a business and we run it as a business with all the acumen and professionalism that goes into any business entity.
Okay, so that's for starters. Let me ask one question, and I've heard this in the past. Is it Dorcas Home or is it Dorcas House?
It is actually. We actually did in the acquisition. We actually formally made it the Dorcas Home. So anything that you sent down over here, real quick story. There were some legal things going on the name, and in any business, the name means something. So we had to make sure everything was there. So it's Dorcas Home LLC.
Great. Yeah, because in the past, it's you can hear, I guess people have interchanged and use it in interchanging ways. Dorcas Home, Dorcas House. Mm-hmm. But I'm glad that you're saying it is officially the Dorcas Home. So if someone was searching for it, and if they look down at the bottom, they could actually see that we're streaming, that they can see it being showed the actual website where they may be able to get a little bit more contact information and various things like that as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So I've known you for some years, and I know you to be a very savvy businessman. So my next question is what makes an entrepreneur and businessman like yourself begin the process in acquiring a Dorcas Home, and where does that come from?
Well, actually, and not to make a long story of it, but I actually was in conversations with a former owner, and we were looking to kind of expand some aspects of the Dorcas Home post-program, in a sense of once the guys get through. We were specifically speaking around how do we address one of the more prevalent issues that most guys have when they're coming out of incarceration, and that is housing. And so at the time, I was already into both commercial and residential and multifamily real estate. And I saw it as a niche market that was being underserved and much needed, because as we all know, especially within the African-American community, mass incarceration has played a major role. So a lot of times when we go over here, we still have our uncles, our brothers, our fathers dealing with housing. And because I was already in the housing business, I was like, hey, let me expand my market into that. Long story short, we started discussing some aspects of the business, and I was looking to give back in a different way after a long and stellar career in corporate, and we thought the acquisition of the Dorcas Home would achieve both things. It would give me a post-retirement job to do, but it would also do something that I always wanted to do, and that is kind of give back to my community. And when you come and look at mass incarceration, it was something that was already near and dear to my heart. So, I wanted to I saw it was a great opportunity to, again, accomplish both tasks.
That's great. Now, so how long have you been in operation, or how long have you since you acquired the Dorcas Home? How long has that been?
We've acquired the Dorcas Home about 2 years ago now, but the Dorcas Home has actually been operating since 2005, and they started off with, I want to say, 4 residents, and now, whatever amount of years later, we're up to anywhere between 23 and 28 residents, and we're looking to actually expand that here in the very near future.
So you say you can have anywhere between 23 and 28.
Yes, at any given time, and again, our goal right now is actually to almost double that capacity here within the next 12 months.
Wow, that'd be great. Now, let me ask you a question. So just to get a little bit of background about the residents and them coming there. So There's always this term that's used for halfway home, but there is a more technical term when someone's looking for this type of service. What is it?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because we deal with that a lot. And you know, the standard nomenclature that most people will be familiar with is a halfway home. What separates us is not necessarily just the services that we do and what we provide, but we are what they call a community residential program. And that means that we are officially sanctioned and licensed through the Virginia Department of Corrections. You know, so anybody can set up a what quote halfway house, you know what I'm saying, and just offer their services for transitional housing. What makes us different, and there are several entities within the state, we're not the only one by no means, but what makes us different is that we have a formal operating procedures, standard operating procedures that's dictated through the Department of Corrections. We are regulated, if you want to call it that. We're audited, you know, so everything from our operating procedures to our health and safety aspects of the facilities, and even our financial, our fiscal responsibility is over here. You know what I'm saying? So we have a direct contractual relationship with the Department of Corrections, and so if they're spending money with us, if they're allocating services to ex-offenders, they want to make sure that those funds are being well spent and being cared for, which as a taxpayer, you should want to know that as well. You know what I mean? That is not being frivolously wasted.
Yeah,
and that kind of separates us from, I would say, the mom and pop. So that kind of circles back to what I was telling you earlier. Yes, we are a family-run business, but we are a business that happens to be run by family members. And we'll say that the business aspect of it, because that's the way the Department of Corrections treats us, and that's the way they want their funds and their operations to be handled. So, you know, and that's the difference over here. So the true term of what we are is we are a community reentry program, or CRP.
Great. Appreciate you clarifying that. And that does add some clarity into what a halfway home would be versus a CRP, because as you're saying, you all are Department of Correction funded. So that means that you receive funding to house and to provide the services that you provide to the individuals, correct?
Exactly. And I would say, you know, for the listeners out there, that Virginia is one of the unique states within, well, Virginia does something uniquely within this country as a state entity, is from the Department of Corrections, in that they will provide supportive services for the first 90 days of release from incarceration. And I think when I heard your first preamble, when you're talking about giving them $25 and, you know, whatever's remaining in their commissary, that truly is the prevailing model throughout this country. You know what I mean? And where once a guy or female, for that means, finishes their term of incarceration, they're pretty much left on their own. And Virginia is very unique, thankfully, in that they recognize that after a period of incarceration, allowing someone to just be, you know, go at it on their own isn't the best thing to combat recidivism. So they're giving this period of time, and we could argue whether 90 days is enough, but what I will tell you is better than nothing.
Yes.
And in that 90 days, a program like ours will provide not only the transitional housing, and that's room, board, shelter, but we also are a repository of a lot of the community services that the ex-offender could tap into. You know what I'm saying? So we provide case management, we provide employment guidance, resume building. We provide services even up to physical, you know, like the YMCA. We provide everything from Virginia Cares, you know, so DMV, you know, so they've got a base, and that's important. You know, within the CRP, once that person comes out, they've got an operating base where they don't have to worry about again, where am I going to lay my head? How am I going to provide and eat, and give them time to adjust to being released, and then getting the assistance to plot a plan or a goal and objectives to what they will want to do before they just kind of go into the general society.
Wow. Well, that's great. Let me ask a question then. This is more based on your experiences as the director of the Dorcas Home. What is the longest time you've currently seen someone do arriving there at the Dorcas Home?
I've gotten 3, and they always stand out just because of the length of time. I've gotten 3 residents that came in, and I want to say one was 41 years, and the other 2 were either 42 or 43 years. They literally went in as teenagers and were coming to me for the first time as really senior citizens.
Ooh. Wow. So I'm currently, if provided the opportunity, and I'll be seeing 45 in a couple of months. So you're saying almost my entire existence, my 40-year existence, you've seen people that have been probably locked up my entire existence since probably like the early 80s.
Yeah, pretty close to it. The one guy the one resident that I always remember, because it was somewhat tragic, that they when he recanted it, not recanted, but when he told his story, they actually held him in jail until he turned 17 so that he could be tried as an adult. And then they gave him life, and of course, we've seen some of the administrations, try to fight the parole and everything else. And he was thankfully, he was actually granted parole, but from a life sentence. So he had all intentions of not ever seeing his freedom.
Wow. So what? So those 3 that you just described, what would you say their mindset was like? Once you got a chance to actually sit down with them and discuss and talk to them, where do you think their mind was at, and how were they feeling, or what could you summarize what you feel like they may have been experiencing after such a long incarceration?
I would say that it varies. I mean, one individual, and just focusing in on those 3, not that this isn't uncommon, almost regardless of the length of time, but just focusing on those 3, I would say there were 3 different views. One, all 3 of them were going to do life, and I would say one came out and was, I don't like to use this term, but it's more appropriate. That was extremely institutionalized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he made up his mind. Again, anecdotally, he told us the story that when he got the word that he could get released, he pretty much said, just let somebody else go. I can stay in jail. That's the only thing he knew at that time was prison. So his adjustment was a little difficult. As a matter of fact, one of the rare times that we actually were granted permission to keep him in the CRP beyond the 90-day term. So they gave him like another 90 days, to try to get adjusted. Another gentleman, he came out, and because he had already had connections, he was involved in a relationship. He had some family support. His adjustment for 40 plus years being institutionalized, we were pleasantly surprised. He was able to connect. He actually ended up getting married, going to in a church, full-time job. But he was involved with family and support people outside the entire time. So that was the difference over there. So those are kind of the extremes on both ends of it. So I would say, the length of time, there's going to be other factors that's going to drive how they make an adjustment. everything from I can't take this, and I don't want to do this, to I'm anxiously awaiting a new life afterwards.
Wow. So you're saying that the amount of support that an individual has during their incarceration can make a significant impact on their transition once they come home.
I think that is, if it's not the most important thing, it's 1A.
Wow. So and because at one time I was formerly a Dorcas Home director. So I've seen people come home and with that mindset, as you said, when individuals have been incarcerated for such an extended period of time, the experience coming home is different for everyone, as you just acknowledged. But it has made a difference seeing that individuals, if they can't get into those support services, that they do so as quickly as possible and then begin to piece their lives together. So that is key. So let me ask another question. So let's maybe take it to just a person coming home. If you're being released, and even I've been recently contacted by an individual that is going up for parole, but he's fearful because his parole date is, as you already know, is undetermined. They'll just pop up one day and say, "Hey, you made parole," and give you a date, and then you're scrambling. And this individual, because this individual is from out of state, from South Carolina, no family members, no loved ones, and has actually done close to about 35 years. Now he's coming home and there's no one to come home to. So he has no home. So he's in the process of looking for a home plan. And my question to you is how does that process begin? So if someone's in an institution, what do you say that, how does that process begin for trying to come to the Dorcas Home or to be a resident at the Dorcas Home?
Well, the very first process and the most prevalent one is working through what they term the institutional counselors. Every institution has a cadre of personnel that deals with reentry, and so they will be working on that individual's home plan. From my understanding, it's literally from the time they start being incarcerated until they're released. But it really starts getting serious around the year mark, the year before their release date. So 98% of our referrals are through institutional counselors. And I would add to that, everybody, when they develop their home plan, everybody wants to go home to mom or auntie or grandma or the wife. That's typically what the home plan is. And they're going to go to an address with family and loved ones. When you come through a CRP, 9 times out of 10, it's because of the scenario that you talked about. There is no one to go home to. You know what I'm saying? So we deal with people who we would term have no home plan. I mean, so the CRP becomes the home plan for them. But to answer the question directly, it starts with the institutional counselor. Once the institutional counselor sends us the referral, then we will screen the information on that referral. And that screening could be anywhere from prior offenses, sexual offenses, mental health status, and in some cases, physical as well, whether it's geriatric, whether it's handicap, some other type of physical impediment that may prohibit them from coming to the program. And let's say everything checks out and it looks good, then we send back an acceptance. We can slot them depending on bed availability and their release date. And if everything works out that they're getting released when we think there's a bed available, and if the match is there, we confirm the match, they accept it, and then they get transported upon release to the CRP.
Wow. Now let me ask a question concerning that. So you're saying the process is, of course, the institutional counselor contacts the Dorcas Home, then the Dorcas Home responds. How many individuals do you think yearly how many referrals do you think? Just guesstimate. I know this is kind of like an off the way question that you may not have found statistics on, but how many individuals do you think you referred to the Dorcas home versus the amount that you all can truly accept? Is it more people being referred there than you can accept?
Oh yeah. Let's put it this way. We'll have at any given year somewhere between 110, 125 individuals that will make it to the Dorcas home and experience the Dorcas home for some length of time. I was just backing into the math, but let's just say I will turn down about 75% of the people that are making inquiries, because I just won't have the bed space capacity to accommodate them.
Wow. So you think you would probably, if you were
easy math, I would probably be 400, somewhere between 400 and 500 referrals. It averages around about maybe 2 a day. Now, that may be on the high end. You know what I mean? Of course, there's about two to three. And obviously some days we're not getting referrals, obviously on the weekend. So it all averages out to, I would say, anywhere between 450 and 500 referrals annually.
Wow. And you all are only able to accept about 125 of that 400 or 500
at the moment. Yep. And
okay, wow. And that does have a level. To me, that shows the need for the active service, and that somewhere along the line in the process, if they're not coming to a community residential program or a community reentry program such as yours, then what is their next alternative beyond that?
Well, I can tell you, in a lot of cases, their next alternative is, because again, remember, we're dealing with those who already don't have a home plan. You know what I mean? So we would be the home plan. So it's not as though they can say, well, if I can't come to the Dorcas, I'm going to go home to mom, because mom is not an option in that case. And in a lot of cases, they're released back to their sentencing district, and you only hope that, like Roanoke, there's facilities like the Rescue Mission, Salvation Army, Goodwill, places like that can accommodate those who are being released, or they're going to get dropped off, and unfortunately, they're going to be released to the street. And I would say though that Virginia does a great job. They don't want to ever release anybody to be homeless. That's one of the caveats, and one of the fortunate things about the Commonwealth is they work diligently to make sure that any offender that's being released isn't released back to the street. Unlike some of the stories you hear about LA and New York, Chicago, where guys are just, you get a bus pass and that's it. Whatever happens. So there's things like private landlords that they contract with. There's hotels that they will contract with for a length of time. And then there's, again, some other supportive services like a Rescue Mission, like Salvation Army, Goodwill, people who deal with homelessness and housing, that they will try to accommodate the ex-offender.
Wow.
But again, but I would say, though, one of the unfortunate aspects of that path is that they may not necessarily have access to all the other supportive services while they are, if you put it, for example, if you get released and you have no other housing options, but then they find a hotel room for you. So who's going to help you at the DMV? Who's going to help you with social services? Who's going to help you get your driving privileges, your birth certificate, things that are lost a lot of times, so that person is still navigating the supportive services on their own, and that can become frustrating. I mean, but they got a roof over their head, but there's another aspect that they're missing out on.
Wow. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is key. That often what happens is yes, as we understand, the numbers of individuals that are being released is large, and even the numbers of individuals that are being released without home plans is a large number as well. But Virginia is is doing a lot better
Doing a
than
lot.
states. And
Exactly.
even,
And
go
you
ahead.
know, and we understand how mass incarceration is affects all of us, but at the same time, you got to give uh, you got to give credit to where credit is due. You know what I mean? Again, it may not be everything that we envision, but when comparable to other states, it's a heck of a lot more than what they would get. And my brother who assists me in this endeavor, he ran the second largest regional jail for the state of South Carolina for almost 20 years. And he could tell you right now there's a stark difference between how South Carolina treats their ex-offenders and how the Commonwealth treats their ex-offenders.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate that. And we do have a question that just came in from Councilman Bestfitch, and I'll put that on the screen if you can see that. Can you see that?
Yes, I think I can read it. Yeah, I got
All
it.
right. So, what should the DOC be doing during incarceration to help people be better prepared for reentry to the community?
We go in and we speak to a lot of the institutions, and our primary contact are those counselors who are specifically tasked with um, setting the offender up for reentry. So there's a lot of reentry programs right now. There's things like change in behavior, mindset, financial management, job training. You know what I'm saying? Resume writing. But I would say though um, it varies from institution to institution. You know what I'm saying? Everything obviously is budget driven. Some institutions are more they have a more elaborate organizational structure for reentry, and some of the smaller diversion centers and work centers may not necessarily be structured in that way. So sometimes it is a game of hit and miss as to which institution you were housed at and what supportive services you had to prepare you for reentry. But for the most part, there's a large number of them that do deal with reentry, and they set up some of the programs for the guys. But again, it varies from institution to institution, and a guy could start a reentry program and be doing well, and then get moved to another one, and then all of that is kind of lost before he finally is released.
You know what? I'm truly glad that that's something that you mentioned, because I've seen that happen in the past. That individuals that wanted GED or other services that could help them once they came home, that there's a waiting list for each institution, and once you're on that waiting list, you're waiting on your turn. But before you even get the opportunity to get into the GED program or the safe serve program or whatever program that you've lined up for, you end up getting shipped to another institution, going back on another waiting list, or
Exactly. Yeah.
that institution may not even
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
same program.
Exactly. And so guys come out and they say, well, I'm halfway through my GED, or I'm halfway through this certification or that certification. But again, it's kind of the luck of the draw. And that's like, most statewide institutions, everything isn't equal at every location. So it truly is the luck of the draw on what you've been able to do. But there is a lot to specifically answer that question. There is a lot that is being done. And one of the aspects that I would say is, like, now that we in the Commonwealth has expanded, Medicaid or Medicare, I forgot which, for all, a lot of the guys are coming out right now having already gotten that. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to continuing the continuous services on the health side of it, they already got their Medicaid ready to go, and the likes. Some of them come out already got their ID because they're already working with the DMV. The DMV actually goes into some of the institutions, and prepare the guys over here. Of course, they can't have the ID until they're ready to leave. But the ID is there. The social security card is there. The birth certificate is there. And these are, some of us, we look at these types of items and like, oh, it's just in my wallet, it's home. You got to realize that a lot of guys miss all of this when they get incarcerated. All of this is taken away from them. So they've got to reestablish a lot of this during their time there. And that's critical because you can't get a job without an ID. People kind of don't think that. You got to prove who you are. And if you don't have a home and you don't have any family, how do you prove who you are if you don't even have an ID on you?
Well, the next thing they'll ask for is your social security card. Majority of the time, they don't
have that. Yeah, you don't have any proof of that. So those are the types of things. When they say what can the DOC do, they're doing those types of things. Is it widespread? Does it hit every person that's housed? The answer is no. But when we do our intake, we check for those items. Did the institution provide those things for the person coming to the CRP? You know what I'm saying? So they get the feedback as to which institutions aren't able to and which institutions are. And I'm assuming they address it internally as they seem fit. But it is things that they do.
Now, let me ask you a question. So even in the places that do provide those type of services, do you think it may be limited access due to the volume of people at some of these institutions?
Yeah. I think you alluded to that earlier, that, hey, you get on the waiting list. You know what I mean? You may have a counselor who's got 200 inmates that they're dealing with. You know what I mean? How do you make sure you're touching 200 individual people every time? You know what I mean? So yeah, that is a great point that you brought up. That and not only that, but you've got not only turnover in the person who's waiting for it, but you got turnover in the staff who's addressing it. You know what I mean? So one guy is working with this counselor, they know his plans, what he's doing, and then that counselor gets promoted, or that counselor gets moved to a different institution, for a variety of reasons. And then he's starting over with a new person. And they're trying to get on, so you're dealing with volume, which you've already talked about. The sheer volume would make it somewhat difficult to keep up and make sure every individual is touched and every individual is prepared with the maximum amount of items that they need to transition out.
Wow. So I have a brief story, and I'll keep it real brief. When I was the director at the Dorcas Home, I had a gentleman that had contacted us through one institutional counselor. That institutional counselor ended up getting, almost like you said, promoted or went to another institution. The next counselor that came in was so swamped that it actually took about almost to that individual's release date for them to even get back to contacting us, which was about a 3-month period of time before they could get back to the process of trying to get this gentleman to come to the Dorcas Home. So what ended up happening is that I actually contacted the institution and spoke with the gentleman on the phone and asked him, and this has happened, asked him, would he be willing to forego some of his good time and sit in the penitentiary for a few more extra days longer just to come to the Dorcas Home. And the gentleman was fine with that because the gentleman said, I have no other option. I have nowhere else to go. So if y'all want to take my adjusted good days and I have to stay in here, 10, 15, 20 more days, that's better than me being released today and literally have nowhere to go.
Yeah. And we do. And that scenario exists to this day. I mean, most guys right now will say, because you're literally waiting on a guy to complete the program so that a bed opens up. And so some guys, I think they can take up to 30 adjusted days. And sometimes we're right on the edge where he's on his 28th adjusted day just to get into the program. So that scenario has not changed since you were there as a director as well. Wow. Matter of fact, it seldom will work out perfectly that the person's normal release date aligns with bed availability. So I would say 80% of the time, it may be one or two, but a lot of times they're going to take a few adjusted days to accommodate the schedule.
Wow. I have another question from Chris Chittum, who's with the Roanoke City. It says, do you have any local government policies or laws that are barriers for people that need to be changed? Can you think of any currently?
I think that question can go a lot of different ways. There's no laws or barriers. You know, I think that's what I'm saying. I can't. I think I need a little bit more information on exactly, a little bit more specifics on that question. But there's really not a lot of laws. Roanoke, especially in particular, is a very, I would call it, offender-friendly city. You know what I'm saying? You know, obviously we still go by the same guidelines for anything for like sex offenders. We those are federal and state type of guidelines as to what can be or who can be in a neighborhood or community. But there's nothing I would say that's overwhelming. I mean, okay. I mean, not the one thing I would say, and take it outside of municipalities, I think just housing alone, restricting housing and restricting areas because a person has a felony is an area that I think should be seriously reevaluated. You know, because it's like, you know, a common scenario is this over here. A person comes out, they may not have all the job skills, therefore their ability to earn money is going to be limited until those skills are acquired, and then they can command more salary. So in that time, they may have to be in either low income or income-based type housing. You know what I'm saying? Well, federal restrictions when it comes to things like Section 8 or other low income housing says you can't have this housing if you have a felony. And so what is the person to do? I can't earn enough to move away, and the one housing available that I do have, you're telling me I'm now restricted because I can't be there. But you've already told me that I've already served my time. I've already given back whatever, you know, pound of flesh, you know, the society wants for my offense. So it seems like the sentence doesn't stop. You know what I mean? So, you know, so when you, and I should have said it in a more appropriate way, when you said you've completed your debt to society by serving your time, then I should be able to go into housing. I should be able to get a job. So is the debt ever served? Is the debt completed? Is the debt paid? If 5 years was my debt, then on year 5 years and the very first day after that, I should be a free citizen to do what I need to do. I shouldn't have those barriers built in, even though I paid the debt. You know, so let me simple example here. If I owed you $50 and I pay you back $50, I no longer owe you anything.
True.
You know, I can't pay you $50 and then you come back and tell me, well, because you at one point owed me $50, you know what I'm saying? I can not longer borrow any money from you. You know, I'm still being punished for the exact same debt. You know what I mean?
So even you speaking on that, we have to look at in most of our localities, and in most localities, the individuals that own most of the low income housing or have that housing stock available are usually like the housing authorities. I know, for instance, in the Roanoke Valley area, the housing authority may have somewhere close to 600 units. And if an individual that comes out of an institution doesn't qualify for, you know, 600 units that could be income based or low income, where they could move in and actually begin that process of piecing their lives together, it's about like what you're saying. Then they find themselves in other conditions where now their housing is a major issue. And because of that weight of the housing being a major issue, a lot of other things start to compound upon them.
Exactly. And then you're finding yourself maybe in a not so desirable neighborhood, just because that's where the affordability lies. But then there's also other things that goes into the not so desirable neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? That the individual may be wanting to remove themselves. You know, one of the most prevalent aspects of reentry and training is, what do they say? People, places, and things. Right? You gotta remove yourself from the same people, places, and things that got you in there. Well, if you limit me and you restrict me, then guess what? You're going to dictate what people, you're going to dictate what places, and you're going to dictate what things that are available for me. So it's a setup. I mean, so you gotta allow people to be able to expand their horizon, move out, you know, make those changes. But I go back to the same thing. It's really is the debt ever paid? You know what I mean? And again, we're talking about the question of the barriers. The barriers are the debt is not necessarily paid, because you're still penalizing the person for an act, even though he served the time for that act.
And I agree 100% with that statement. And even looking at what the question that was posed, one of the biggest barriers that I have acknowledged and seen, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, and I use the analogy or the story of, you know, something similar to when somebody goes on to the Army. So when you go to the Army, they kind of like break you down and then build you up to be the soldier prepared to do the work that you have to do going forward. It's almost like that when you become incarcerated. When you become incarcerated, you become this other individual, and that environment kind of builds you and shapes you differently. But what I've noticed is when people come from the Army and coming back home, it's like, yeah, we trained you how to be a soldier, but now we can't train you how to be who you were before you came here. You know, and it's the same thing with going into the institution or being incarcerated. The condition or the environment changes you and makes you a different person. But when you're ready to be released, no one's able to show you how to be you again. You know, and once you've been in there, and when I've spoken to people, and you know, during their incarceration, I've told them that the longer that you're incarcerated, the more away from your true feelings, your true character you get. So if you're only incarcerated for, let's say, a year, then, you know, you left your feelings, emotions, compassion, and various things like that somewhere in some jail a year ago, but you're able to go back and pick it up almost. But if you left it at some jail 27 years ago, all your feelings, all your emotion, and all your compassion at some prison or some jail cell 20 years ago, how do you go back to being who you were before then?
Yeah,
and there's not a lot of programs that kind of help and assist with that.
And you know, having served in the military, I can appreciate the analogy that you talked about. The one aspect that I would say is that they might break you up is in a more positive way.
True.
The build up is, okay, at the end of this journey, be it basic training, AIT, or time in service, you know, I'm looking to have a better person, a more disciplined person. But look at some of the aspects in what they're building up. They're building up a skill or a training. Where is that in the institutions? You know, they took a lot of that away. So once, you know, decades ago, yeah, you might have been incarcerated, but they built up the person for release. They built the carpenter. They built the mason. They built the bricklayer. You know what I'm saying? They built the pipe fitter or the electrician. And if you look at it and say, look, okay, yeah, you're doing time, but every aspect of your time here is I'm literally planning and building you for release, like the military. Because at some point, the military says, you have to now perform at a level that I need you to perform. You need to be proficient at it. But if I only break you down and continue to break you down, and I don't add anything to build you back up, what am I building? I'm only building a prisoner. I'm only building a person who can survive in an environment that we as humans weren't necessarily meant to be in. So I'm building a survival mechanism in something that's not necessarily normal. So I'm only building you to be abnormal. That's all I'm doing. I'm building your behavior to be abnormal. I'm building your behavior to be abnormal, but I just need you to be docile while you're incarcerated, unlike the military. You know what I'm saying? Where they're building discipline. They're building job skills. They're building work ethic. They're building teamwork. They're building esprit de corps. They're building, they're building on it. Why? Because I know at some point that person's going to come out and he's going to have to add to the general civil society. And if we treated our institutions like that, yes, the person might have made a bad judgment and might have done something, but where's the building process? Because at some point, again, the debt is going to get paid. And I need that person to be able to come back into society, a better person, better decision maker, better judgment than got them over here. And that's the missing element over here. And again, I don't say any of this to absolve the individual from the personal responsibility at all. And so if anybody's listening to this, we're not saying, oh, this is need to be a great kumbaya type thing over here. People do bad things and there are consequences for doing bad things. And there should be an ownership and accountability for that. You know what I'm saying? But as society, we have to balance that. And that's the tricky part. How do we balance that? How do we balance, yes, the person is going to be penalized for what they did, you know what I'm saying? But the penalty shouldn't be a death penalty. And I probably shouldn't use death penalty because you actually can do that, but it shouldn't be a lifetime penalty in a sense. Yeah. If the debt wasn't lifetime, then you gotta think what's going to happen post life.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. I do like that you added that part, is because yes, the military will break you down and rebuild you to be a better individual, and it's really trying to figure out. And what ends up happening is that individuals, as we know, go through this length of time being or becoming this person, and then one day you wake up and you only got 6 months left, and then before you know it, your 6 months turns into 3 months, and then your countdown is really closer, and a lot of feelings and emotions start to stir up in you, and then before you know it, you're looking at somebody in there that you've been in an institution with for the last 17 years, and you're saying to yourself, man, I only got 10 days in a wake up. Yeah, I got 10 days left. When I go to sleep on that 10th day, when I wake up in the morning, I'm able to be released from here and go home.
And what am I going to What am I going to do? You know? And we see it in a microcosm of our 90-day program. You know what I'm saying? I see guys come in on day one. It's almost predictable, the behavior and the feelings, by day 30, what's going to happen by day 60. And usually by day 60, those feelings, what you just talked about, comes back up. Okay, I've been in the CRP, you know what I'm saying? I've been quote unquote sheltered, from some of the real world aspects, but I got 30 days now. You know what I'm saying? Is the job going well? Is the job not going well? Did I get an apartment? What I'm going to do, how I'm going to reconnect with family. I now got to go home and really deal with my family. And the anxiety builds back up once more. Yeah.
Wow. I think this is, and I know that there's some, that almost like what they call the elephant in the room. So I will ask a few questions concerning this current condition and time that we're in now, because I'm sure with a program with a CRP like yours, there's probably some changes that you've had to go through recently because of the COVID pandemic and things like that. Has there been any changes there, or what's going on during the pandemic? How are things at the Dorcas home during this time?
Yeah, just like any other business, we are essential business. Guys aren't going to stop getting released. So guys got to have some place to go. We treat ourselves just like an essential business, but we've taken different protocols here in the last 60 days. We do everything from, we try to manage through the social distancing as much as possible. Just a quick example, we are starting to rotate meal times. You know what I'm saying? So instead of everyone congregating at one meal time, we're spacing it out, having multiple, 15, 20-minute intervals with less and less people over here. New arrivals, because we do have an inability to totally quarantine, new arrivals are monitored for the first 7-10 days. That's temperature testing, every day to make sure, that we don't see a spike in a fever or the things that, the general public has been guidance that they've been giving. We got hand washing stations all through. But there's an element of the program that we call transitional visits or furloughs, where after a certain period, the resident can go back to their family or go back to their home and visit for a couple of days and come back. It's like a pass. But we've eliminated all of those. So they're now restricted to the program for their whole entire duration until this is over with, as well as we've limited leisure time as well. So we've limited it to just you can leave the building for work, visiting the PO, any type of doctor or counseling appointments, and of course any type of medical emergencies. But other than that, we're restricting their movements as much as possible. And again, we've even set up things like some of the counseling sessions. We've set up private rooms that they can still have their intensive outpatient meetings that they would have with like Blue Ridge Behavioral Health, but they're doing a teleconference now. So we're trying to accommodate as much as possible those types of items also.
That's great. That's great. Now let me ask you about so how does that dynamic impact individuals that have just, I could imagine that
I already know the question. Let's just say it wasn't the most popular thing, but we're not doing this just unilaterally. These are some of the restrictions that we got clearance from our local district probation and parole. So they're helping us as well, because they've changed some of their protocol also, and we've spoken to our higher ups through the Western Region Department as well. So everyone is in agreement that the general well-being at this particular time is must override, some individual, I have to say individual liberties, but some of the prior protocols that we did have, we just had to change. And I don't think that's when the governor sent down and said, certain amount of businesses are closing, they close. You know what I mean? You can't go here, you can't go there. It is a little bit different because you're dealing with someone whose freedom's been restricted for, in some cases, years, and they're coming back to the exact same type of restrictions. But again, we got to take the general well-being and health is more important at this time.
Wow. Well, I'm gonna tell you, I can imagine what you're dealing with when they've come from an institution and then come there and then they're like, I'm just restricted here as I was there.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it was for me in that position, it was a little bit difficult for me to allow people to know that really you're not, it is to a certain extent, but really you're not. I do want to thank individuals that have contacted us and have asked questions. I got one question, and we're running just 1 or 2 minutes over, but I got one question. If we can kind of answer this question as quickly as possible, and then try to move forward. I believe I don't want to mispronounce her name. Delethea Ferguson said it has been horrible for individuals during this time. And thanks for the conversation. It's been very informative. But I do got a comment from Jennifer Deegan, who's actually part of the Coalition for Justice. Hi, Jennifer. Do you see the DOC taking responsibility for some kind of 2-week quarantine before folks are sent out into the community?
I can't answer that question because I don't necessarily answer for the DOC. It would help us if they would do something like that. I know it would bring me a little bit more comfort if something was put into place such as that. But I do know that we follow very closely. If you go to the DOC's website right now, they talk about certain institutions, and they talk about who has tested positive for the coronavirus by inmate and by personnel. So we keep a watch of that, you know what I mean? And so we can kind of we know who's coming from what institutions, so we can kind of monitor that. But it would be a great idea. I think this is lasting a little bit longer than anybody first thought, and I would dare say that if it's going to continue any further, and we all pray that it doesn't, but if those restrictions are there, I could foresee the DOC doing something like that. Because again, it's just not coming back to a CRP. There are more people just released back into mainstream society than would ever hit a CRP. And so at some point that discussion will probably take place.
Yeah, I'm sure. And it was just great that you were able to explain to us that you all do have a process now. That, of course, you can't quarantine an individual for, an extremely long period of time, but you all do have a process now that you are monitoring individuals. And I know the way that the building is set up with locations that you all can, house certain individuals away from other individuals if needed. So it's good to hear that you all are taking those type of precautions. Elliot, I would like to thank you, Mr. Major, for taking your time out of this day. We're coming up on that hour part. Is there any last comments that you would like to state or say or anything like that?
No. I think, and of course, you and I have had a lot of private conversations. I think there's a lot of great work that you're doing. And I think the more information that we can give the general public about what we do and the situation that a lot of guys are in, is all better, because again, these are our brothers, our fathers, our cousins, our uncles, nephews, and they're part of our community. So the more that everyone knows their experience and what they're going through, the better we can adopt them back into the fold.
Wow, that's well said. I appreciate it, Brother Major, for coming on with me today. For those individuals that look forward, that we're going to have some more discussions like this concerning incarceration, concerning social justice, even in concerning how to get involved with the work that we do, whether it's in front of the scenes or behind the scenes. There's a lot of things that Brother Major does that he could use assistance with, whether it's volunteering, other information, other resources and things like that. So if you can, please get in contact. If you look at the bottom, you can see the email information there. The website information there, which gives the email contact as well as the telephone contact too. To all of the partners and everybody that is part of the Coalition for Justice, it is not just myself. There's a team in Blacksburg. There's committees that we work with here in Roanoke as well. Thank you for helping and assisting with us putting this on, and thank you to everyone that was available. And I look forward to our meeting that we'll have next week at the same time. It should be very informative. Thank you, Brother Major, for coming on, and everybody have a nice day and stay safe.
All right, have a safe stay. All right.
Bye.